of having. All right, recording just started, so I'll give a quick. So good morning, everyone. I'm just going to give a quick recap of what we started off with. Last week we ended the discussion talking about allowed namespaces, or how we're going to restrict access to certain namespaces. And instead of calling it as restriction of access, we started defining it as bucket sharing, or sharing across namespaces. Just by redefining that, we look at the problem in a different way.
But my question is, what will be part of the
alpha?
Yeah.
So as a part of alpha, we're proposing just allowed namespaces.
Okay.
The current one.
Okay, perfect.
However, if there is pushback on it, we have an alternate approach that we're considering for post alpha. So the alternate approach is going to be shown, assuming we all come to a decision we all agree on the new approach. So during this week, I've been thinking about the approach we discussed last week. So I'll give a quick recap on what that last week's decision was. So we discussed about allowed namespaces, or having a list of namespaces set in our bucket class, which will be copied over to the bucket when bucket is created. And the namespaces in the list are the only ones where you can have this bucket used. That was the original idea. We then moved on and talked about using selectors instead of having a static list, or because selectors are much more friendly. So the issue we saw with allowed namespaces was that in order to share it with a new namespace, you would still need an admin step, or you would need an admin step because admin would have to go and update the bucket object, which is a cluster scoped object. So we were trying to remove that admin step. We came up with the concept of namespace selectors. We thought that would be better, but even within namespace selectors, if the selector is not there either on the namespace or if the bucket doesn't select it, you need the admin step anyways. It seems more Kubernetes style, but it doesn't really take the admin step out of the picture. So bucket sharing across users, we hadn't discussed yet. By that point, and I'm not sure who came up with this idea, but someone talked about this idea of sharing a completely different way, where someone expresses intent of wanting to share the bucket to a particular namespace, and then on that namespace, someone accepts that new bucket that comes in, that was kind of the approach we all finally ended up with.
I think in that approach is similar to the like the namespace transfer thing. Yeah. But that one, normally the original one, I think will be deleted. I think it's basically transfer. But in your case, do you mean for this to be used by multiple?
Yeah, so we won't.
That's a little different.
So we won't do a transfer. We will do an export. So the difference is, So I'm going to present something.
I'm just saying that there seems to be a difference. The namespace one, basically you request the transfer, but then after the transfer, then it just goes to this other namespace. It does not go back.
Yeah. So this one is. So what this one
used by multiples, basically. That's what you want, right?
Yeah. So yes, we do. So the bucket itself doesn't go to another namespace in this case. So this is another example of how this export is done by someone from Carvel, VMware Tanzu. So someone from VMware shared this. If that person is on the call, thank you very much. This is the names to how it's been described is a great way to explain what we were thinking of. I think it moves us a step in the right direction. So Shing, to answer your question, we don't transfer, instead we export. So
I think what was that thing that Tim led us to check? I forgot, there was
so that one is for bucket mutation. So he was
no, there was another project.
Yeah,
that has similar concept that was using Right, that has like a multiple namespaces in there.
Right,
So what
right.
was that? I forgot.
So that was
Gateway or something? What is that?
yeah, gateway.
Okay.
So gateway was there because we had resources that was managed both within namespaces and outside of it. Because at one point we were thinking about having a namespace bucket and a non-namespace bucket. And Tim was saying the way gateway is managed at Google is there are top level gateways that are managed by a specific admin team at Google, and then each team gets to manage their own smaller level gateways based on however their application looks, and something like that is what Tim was suggesting. But that's again for mutation use case, because we wanted to be able to change the bucket. You wanted to be able to do self-service bucket mutation in some cases, and in other cases we wanted to have like only admin driven ones, but that doesn't apply here.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is bucket sharing use case. It's different from bucket mutation. So this was a good piece of design someone shared on our Slack channel, and it captures what we discussed last week. So again, allowed namespace selectors, we talked about the issues with them. This one, this approach lets us share buckets across namespaces without requiring an admin. Just the cozy control will be able to enable this. So what this does is it does something like a bucket export. So I'll just explain what happens here with secrets, and we'll extrapolate it to buckets. So they have two concepts called as a bucket export and secret export and a secret request. So secret export is a way to offer a secret in one namespace to another namespace. But then the first namespace ideally shouldn't just be allowed to create a resource in the second namespace. So the second namespace, in order to make sure that the export facility is not abused, the second namespace accepts it or shows the intention that you can create a bucket or secret in my namespace by having the secret request object. The secret request object expresses the intention that a secret needs to be brought into this namespace, and a secret export from the other namespace that's actually providing the secret here shows how or starts the operation to export it. Something similar, actually exactly the same thing, extrapolated to buckets, is where is kind of how we discussed, is kind of where we left off last week. So to first question, does everyone understand this approach with secrets before even going to buckets?
Sorry, Sid, like I can't make it, like I cannot understand.
Okay, so
can you please estimate more?
Yeah, definitely. So Jiffin, what we're trying to solve is a way to share buckets. So when a bucket is created, you created it using a bucket request in one namespace. Now, if we want to use the bucket from a different namespace, how do we enable that process? That's the question at hand.
That part I understood. Like I didn't understand. Like, so the secret is exported by a request from other user in a different namespace, right? Something like that.
Well, the person who created the bucket, or the person who created the secret in this case, chooses to export it to specific other namespaces.
Oh, okay.
That's the first step.
Based on a request, or like whether he decides like he need to export it?
No, the person decides that they need to export it first.
Okay, fine.
And then the other side, they need to accept it.
I thought it's the other way around. Okay, fine. Thanks.
I mean, the order of operation doesn't matter, but technically it doesn't matter. But both objects need to be there before the export happens.
Okay.
Yeah. So you can only accept a secret if it's already exported. It's coming to you. Calling it secret request, yeah, makes it sound like you request first. But either way, it doesn't matter. Which comes.
Sid, would it be possible to embed the request for sharing within the BAR, so there's not a separate resource needed?
I think that's a good idea, actually. Yeah, but it's like persistent volume claims, volume claims in pods, right? It's, you know, you can either create a PV by using a PVC or by creating a PVC, or you can just put the volume claim in a pod, and that ends up creating a PVC for you.
Right.
Yeah, that can be like a syntactic sugar. I mean, like the underlying object would still be on its own. Would that work? Is that how you were thinking of it too, Jeff?
I wasn't thinking of it that way, but yes, it could be that way.
Okay, so you're thinking it'll always be just tied to the BAR?
I was, because that's your request for that is your bucket access request, and it seems like they're connected.
Well, okay, so here's the other question then. So do you want to allow, okay, so if we went down that route of having it be embedded always, just that's the only way of it be embedded into the BAR, then that would mean that would mean one bucket export is only for one BAR, wouldn't it? Like if what if I wanted multiple BARs for one bucket from a different namespace? Do I have to export it multiple times? So say it was embedded in the BAR, then the export is tied to that BAR, right?
Yeah, a BAR is namespace. So to me, this idea of exporting a bucket, request and export, is a way of bridging namespace barriers, right? And so a BAR in a different namespace from the BR is this cross namespace case. And the BAR is already a little different in that scenario, where it references the bucket instance directly instead of referencing a BR. And so it seems like in that you could also accommodate, it could even be implicit in a BAR that you're requesting access, you're requesting an export to the secret. So the control could just be in the BR's namespace. That's where you have control of exporting, but BAR is implicitly request. That's kind of what I was thinking.
Yeah, that makes sense. If we go down that route, here's the trade-off, it seems like. So when I export it from the namespace where I create the bucket, I'm exporting it to the other namespace. So multiple BARs can use that bucket from the other namespace. If we define the intention that way, that I'm exporting it to another namespace, then multiple BARs should be able to utilize that bucket. By creating a implicit bucket request or bucket accept, I don't know the name yet, but whatever we come up with, by having it be implicitly embedded into the receiving BAR, are we tying it to just that BAR? Are we tying the bucket export to just that one BAR? Can we have multiple BARs still for that one export?
I guess it wouldn't make sense to have multiple BARs in the same namespace requesting access to the same bucket, because it seems to me that if you had multiple workloads in a namespace sharing a bucket that was created out of a different namespace, you would only need one BAR, right? Because those workloads can use the same
credentials,
secret, and credentials, right? Because they're in the lowest, they're in the most granular security boundary that Kubernetes provides.
Namespace.
That's, yeah, right. That's what I was just thinking. This is just top of my head, Sid. I haven't given it any other thought than just right now.
Yeah, we'll flush it out as much as possible. No, I see where you're coming from. Would it be fair to say that you might want to revoke credentials of one workload that's using the bucket versus another workload?
Yes, I think that's fair to say. Yeah.
Would that mean
that could come up? It seems.
Wouldn't that
mean?
Go on.
It just means that. Well, I guess that's a really good question. The Kubernetes views everything within a namespace as equal, essentially. I know there's cluster role bindings where you can reference a service account or a group, right? But in general, the namespace is the security boundary. And so that to me suggests that within the namespace, workloads are expected to have equal access to everything else, in that namespace. So they're kind of treated as peers. I don't know.
Makes sense. As a security design, yeah. We don't as a security design, I don't think we need more than one accessor per bucket. Because just like you said, if I have two accessors, it doesn't make it more secure. But it does add flexibility though, right? Because I can now turn off or take.
Yes. I'm sorry, I have a delay still. Yes, it adds flexibility for the case of a runaway workload or something within a namespace. One workload is rogue, it's going bad, and you want to revoke its credentials, and the other one is good. But it seems like you could just kill that pod. You wouldn't have to just revoke its credentials. You could just kill it if it's a runaway pod. I don't know.
Yeah, that's true actually. Okay, so last question then. Is there any reason why we might not be able to kill the pod, but we want to revoke the credentials? Is that even a possibility?
Yeah, I mean, well, if there's a deployment, I mean, you could kill the deployment. You could have a deployment, I guess, that runs multiple different workloads.
No, I meant more from like the application perspective, where the application needs to keep running, but it shouldn't have the credentials.
Oh.
Or is that too much?
Yeah, I mean, what does it do then? What work does it get to do if it doesn't have access to the bucket?
Something that's unrelated to the bucket.
I guess that could just be a piece of the application that's turned off. That's a feature that's not enabled. But you're getting, I mean, it's getting a little bit, theoretical now. I mean, yes, it's possible.
No, the question is, the question is, should we design for that? Should we allow that or no? Because I'm still trying to answer the question of, do we embed it in the BAC or BAR, or do we have it be a separate object? So based on the answers to these questions, we can decide. As in, if we need the flexibility to revoke one and not the other, we probably want to have, an object on its own, rather than embedded in the BAR, right?
I see it as a typical trade-off that we often deal with, of flexibility versus opinionated simplicity, right? And so, we could have the opinion in Cozy that you have one set of credentials per namespace. That's the way we want to do it, at the cost of some flexibility for maybe narrow use cases. This is our standard trade-off that you look at all the time in design like this, is flexibility versus simplicity.
Okay, so I see where you're coming from. Actually. Yeah, the thing is, it's a hard question to answer.
I agree.
Yeah, I'm not sure how we go about. I think we have to decide as a group, actually. we have to decide as a group how we'll address. Yep, how we'll address this. So quick question. So is everyone following what's going on here? Or take that as a no. So I'll quickly explain what we're discussing. So we're discussing how we share buckets. I mean, everyone understands this part so far, I think. So we were talking about this concept of bucket export equivalent to the secret export that I'm showing on the screen, and some form of instead of bucket request that is on the other side. So bucket export says that I want to export this bucket to another namespace, and bucket request on that namespace says I want to receive that bucket on this side. So we were talking about how this bucket request should look on the receiving receiving namespace, and we were saying instead of having a separate object of its own, why not we simply just embed it into the bucket access request? The reason for that is bucket access request is currently the way we have to request access to a bucket. And so it seems like a natural fit to just embed it. Now we're kind of evaluating that approach against another approach where instead of embedding this request, this acceptance of the bucket in the other namespace into a bucket access request, we're thinking of creating a whole new CRD that would accept this bucket. So let's set names for these. So let's call this let's call the exporting CRD as bucket export. And on the other side, do we call it bucket accept? Is that a decent name? Any thoughts? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm just, you want to call it like a request, but we already have bucket request.
Right. Yeah, bucket receive, or it can be a part of a bucket request too. A bucket request can be enhanced to allow this. So either you create a bucket request for creating a bucket or for sharing a bucket, something like that.
In that, yeah, interesting. And in that, if that were to happen, then the BAR could reference the BR that's in that same namespace. But maybe you don't even need BAR anymore. I don't know. Yes, that's interesting, Sid. I don't want to derail us, but it's interesting that you could maybe eliminate a BAR, and the BR is a request for either a new bucket or a request to share a bucket. Anyway.
Yeah, request to a shared bucket. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's go with that approach for now. Let's just play this game of the thought experiment. So let's just say we're going to enhance bucket request, the current resource, to also be able to request a shared bucket from another namespace. And we have this bucket export object, which will be used to export a bucket or create a shared bucket. And it's going to be point to point because we want to specifically say this is the other namespace that I'm sending this bucket to. So bucket export and enhance bucket request. So if that's the case, so we have bucket export and enhance bucket request. So should we, in that case, it's embedded, right? Like by design, it's embedded. There's no conversation of
right.
Yeah, we don't have to worry about this other thing that we just talked about. Yeah, I like that. I actually really like that. Now, what are the implications for, in this approach, what are the implications for brownfield buckets, like buckets that are created out of Cozy? Can we use this concept for that as well?
For that concept, we end up, referencing the bucket instance directly today in the BAR, or it could be directly in a BR. But that's our connection. make a direct reference. The creator of the BAR or the BR makes a direct reference to the bucket instance that already exists, and that gives us Brownfield, right?
Right. So static Brownfield, yeah. So in the BR, in this new BR, would we have some mechanism to say this is a static Brownfield bucket? Like the difference between static Brownfield and a shared bucket or regular Brownfield would just be that the regular Brownfield was created by Cozy in a different namespace, but the static Brownfield was created outside of Cozy. So currently, to do static Brownfield, the reason I bring it up is currently the way to do static Brownfield requires an admin to go and create this bucket object in the clustered object, the bucket, with the right values. But with this concept of bucket export and the new bucket request, I'm just wondering if there's a way to also solve that use case, the static Brownfield use case, where let's say we just request for a bucket that's static Brownfield bucket, and then Cozy goes and figures out how to get the credentials and everything for it. That way we don't need an admin step even for static Brownfield.
Right. The other thing I mentioned, though, just thinking about self-service, when you say eliminate an admin step, that gets us, more towards self-service model, which I recognize the benefit of that. But at the same time, we've just shifted a burden from an administrator to the user, because this user has to do exports, and so we're gated on this user. I mean, the people, the workloads that want to share this bucket, and maybe there's a lot, maybe there's 1,000 workloads. This user now has the job, the role of exporting this bucket to all the different namespaces that might want to use it. And so the work hasn't disappeared, this manual work. It's just been shifted from an admin to a user.
Yeah, but it's self-service.
I see it.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Well, the amount of work cannot be reduced, right? Like we're not automating it. What we're trying to do is enable self-service here. We're not dealing with usability as much as just ability, just self-service, really. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah. So
it does make sense, but it is something that we weren't considering. We were actually, well, I just in the genesis of this design and how it's evolved, we've made trade-offs almost every time where we give admin control instead of the user. Mm-hmm. And that's been deliberate. And this is a change to that direction. And it could be based on feedback from Tim, or it could be just we've thought about it long enough that we think self-service is important to deal with now. But I just wanted it to be recognized as a little bit of a change in philosophy or in a goal. It's kind of a different goal. We didn't have a self-service goal in the original KEP.
I see what you're saying. So yeah, Tim brought this up. We didn't explicitly define self-service as a goal. I think it's I see what you're saying, and it's important to be wary of, or even self-aware of such drastic changes even. But I think it's still worth thinking about and having a discussion about, so we understand what alternate approaches are possible and what the trade-offs are. Like you said, there are a bunch of places and where we decided that admin has the manual say, and it's kind of baked into the design. So if we were to go against that philosophy all of a sudden, we'll have to possibly rethink all of it. That's where you're coming from, right?
Yes.
Fair enough. Yeah, we'll take it one step at a time. So forget the the static brownfield bucket, right? Let's not go down there just yet. And we'll bucket sharing has always been questionable. So bucket sharing has always been it really didn't enable the level of control that we really wanted for it. I think just that one use case. In that case, I think it makes sense to at least explore this, export and the new bucket request concept. What do you think about drawing the line there? Just for sharing, we do it, but we don't go ahead and solve self-service for all use cases. Jeff?
Yeah, I mean, I think sharing is probably the most important use case. So it's worth doing. It's worth doing that. I think it's also important that we don't necessarily have a full design in place. I mean, I think we need to temper these designs with what we're trying to get to alpha, right? To just get the first merge. And I think that if we can convince ourselves that we could do this later, and it doesn't have to be done at the beginning right now, that will help us, finally get an alpha version out, which I think is very important.
Agreed. So you're saying that we just have the approach in hand now. We don't even have to have it fully ironed out, you're saying, at least for the sake of
we have to be convinced. Yes, I'm saying we have to pretty much be convinced we could do this in a non-disruptive way to the API, although we potentially can break the API since it's alpha.
That's the reason Go on.
We need to believe it's doable, that there's not we don't have to just completely redo the design in order to accommodate this use case. And if we can convince ourselves that, I think we could, unless we believe it's now very high priority, I think we could table it and not include it in alpha.
Okay, so let's talk about that. So we did get pushback last time on this allowed namespace concept because it really wasn't achieving much. It was a static at that point.
Yeah, and it was fair criticism on Tim's part. It's always been, like you said, it's always been difficult. Allowed namespaces, this Cozy is the only enhancement I can think of that has this list of namespaces. So it's very different from everything else. It always feels awkward, but we couldn't come up with anything better. But what I'm suggesting, Sid, is maybe V1 Alpha 1 doesn't do bucket sharing. We don't have allowed namespaces in there, and we just don't share the bucket across namespaces.
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm not saying that that's the right answer. I'm just saying we could at least think about that and decide if we need to support bucket sharing across namespaces in V1 Alpha 1.
Interesting.
That's pretty good, actually. It's narrowed down. Otherwise, it's this cap already has a lot of stuff, right? Narrow it down. Maybe.
Yes.
I like that. Yeah.
So that would mean that the bucket is only accessible to the namespace on which it was created, right?
Yeah, alpha. Yeah.
And beta, we can come up with a bucket export and something like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
It would mean you can share a bucket within a namespace. Multiple workloads in the same namespace could share the bucket, but a workload in a different namespace could not share it in V1 Alpha 1. But we believe you'll need to share it across namespaces. So we have to have some idea of how we would do that still.
But if we do a bucket export and bucket allow export, for instance, which is distinct from bucket access request, if we don't mix up the two concepts, what's the problem? In a beta, I'm talking about.
So sorry, you're saying bucket export. What was the other concept you said?
No. So for the alpha, we do just
no sharing.
Nothing, no sharing. Yeah. And for the beta, something like bucket export and bucket allow export for sharing. So we don't mix up the existing concepts. So we do exactly like the secret export, secret request. What's the problem with that?
No, yeah. So I already think it's modular, in the sense. So what we're trying to answer, what Jeff is saying is, we could go with this approach, but we want to know that with where we're leaving off the design at alpha, we don't have any restrictions that prevent us from going towards this approach.
No, yeah, sure.
Jeff,
if we want to converge, maybe it's the best, unless somebody, the people, I don't know, people approving the cap decide we absolutely need some method to share the buckets in the alpha. Can we be sure of that, or?
Sorry, repeat that. I didn't get that.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I don't know I don't know the full process of the approval of the cap, right? But you mentioned that somebody potentially rejected.
Yeah, the previous design. So
the design because it was missing something or whatever.
Yeah, bucket sharing, we were using allowed namespaces.
Okay, so they were rejecting allowed name for this approach, but they are not against, for instance, not doing anything. So basically,
fair enough. So yeah,
okay.
In the sense, so no, that's a good question. So it's a choice we make. We say we don't do it now, but we'll do it in the future. We made that, we kind of made that choice last time also, and we said we won't do bucket mutation now, we'll do it later. But he was still interested in seeing a possible approach. So he wanted to know, how would you do it later? Like, is there a idea? Is there something you already know? And the reason he was asking was to make sure that the current design didn't prevent us from actually solving the problem in the future. So
it makes sense. So for instance, if we do nothing for the alpha, and we come up with a design like bucket export and bucket accept export, for instance.
Yeah.
What prevents us from doing that? Is there a technical reason?
There isn't. Yeah, there is not. That's exactly what Jeff is saying, though. He's saying make sure that we have we have the next steps planned out, so that and make sure that the current stage does not prevent us from going there. Like, have an answer for how would you solve it. I know you're not doing it for alpha, but how would you solve it? To have an answer to that question.
So we just say in the cap. Right. So for next step, we will have a design similar to secret export, secret request, and it should work. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Jeff, did I capture your concerns correctly?
Yes.
Okay, cool. Perfect. All right. So okay, so how do we go about this then? Shall we write a document, or should we give a hint in the cap? What do we do? So we're going to take this stance that bucket sharing will not be, enabled or possible with the alpha design, and then do we say I
think you can put that in maybe non-go. Just say this will be addressed in the future. Maybe then we'll see what what team will say. Maybe he make this like a phase 1, phase 2, but that's fine. Just as long as you mention that it'll be addressed in the future, I think that's fine.
So last time when we said that about bucket mutation, he still wanted to know how would you even solve it. Like, he wanted to know, he wanted to at least hear it and know what the possible solution would be.
But you can just talk about what we discussed, like that.
Yeah, you can say we plan to do. We're not sure yet, but we plan to do a design similar to secret export, and we see what we're gonna say, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, so I was just wondering how we do this. Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. Okay, so let's. I think this is a good place to close the discussion on bucket sharing. I mean, conclude the discussion on bucket sharing.
Oh, but if you're sure that we can implement something like secret export and it will work with buckets.
I think one question that still hasn't been answered. So here is where I'm not sure of. Again, we can decide as a group as to what we do about this problem. So I think bucket export and bucket accept or bucket request seems like a good model as of now. I don't think we've gotten to a point where we know it satisfies all the different concerns we have. We'll get to it. But before that, there is another use case, which is static brownfield buckets, or buckets that were created out of Cozy, and we want to use it in our Kubernetes workloads using the Cozy infrastructure. So that is like a bucket import concept. I don't know if given that we've come up with this approach of export and bucket request on the two different namespaces. Should we have another concept, or should we follow something similar, or should we see if we can use this bucket export and request infrastructure, or this design for static brownfield buckets also?
Why wouldn't it work?
I'm saying that I think it'll work, but my question is, see, we have a different approach already in place for static brownfield, which is the admin goes and creates the bucket object in the cluster name, in the cluster scope. And the admin would go and manually put in all the different values, and they would create the bucket object. That's what we've said. But with the concept of bucket export or this whole design, I feel like something like either we can make the bucket request to have a provision to import a bucket, or we can have a all new separate bucket import object to import buckets created out of Cozy. Now my question is, should we I want to explore that question. I want to know how does our current this bucket export design affect static brownfield buckets? If that question is answered,
I don't think it would, because you have the bucket object, and then we do have the credentials somewhere, and then you export. I mean,
so the challenge, I think, what Sid was saying, we don't have an explicit bucket request object for the brownfield, right? That was the issue, or something like.
Yeah, you're right.
So the idea with the SIG bucket export and bucket request, we are changing the mechanism to have a bucket request, right? So we can use the same. So bucket request need to have the bucket object, and even for the static brownfield, we have the bucket object, right? It will be the person. So even I don't feel it won't make any difference, or it won't be a difficult thing to
do. That's why you want a separate bucket export, and another one which would be, for instance, bucket accept export, specifically for access, for cross namespace access, and you don't mix up with the existing Cozy concepts. So in the brownfield case, you just create a bucket export from the source namespace, and in the target namespace, you do a bucket allow export, and then you can see the brownfield bucket, right? We cannot mix up with existing concept. We need to create two new CRDs for that, which is fine, I think.
So Vianney, can you repeat what you're saying? So yeah. Or let me try to capture it. Let me know if I'm thinking if what you're saying is correct, or if I'm thinking of it the way you're thinking. So you're saying that so this concept of bucket export and bucket request makes sense. Did you also somewhere in the middle mention bucket access export?
No, the problem is the bucket request name is already taken, so we need to find another name. So let's say bucket export and bucket allow export, or
bucket import
maybe. But,
bucket import.
Yeah. And those concepts are independent from the other cozy concepts. So totally independent. We don't try to mix up.
Well, yeah. So we were saying, why not just have this import be embedded into the bucket request?
But the problem is in Brownfield, you don't have bucket request.
Yeah. So what we're saying is create a bucket request object with either the import field or fields to create a new bucket.
But why do you absolutely want to mix up the two concepts? Because they are orthogonal, right?
Well, the import and request, no, they don't have to be orthogonal, right? Because bucket access request currently points to a bucket request.
Yeah.
And we can maintain that invariant. We can make it an invariant if we did it that way. Currently, currently in case of Brownfield, bucket access request points directly to the bucket. And in case of Greenfield, it points to the bucket request. So it's not an invariant. Depending on the situation, it changes, varies. But if we were to go with this concept of bucket sharing, where we said bucket request can have an embedded field to say I'm importing the bucket, then you can maintain that invariant of saying bucket access request points to the bucket request always. And that simplifies the architecture.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Because
having two ways to do one thing is always, more not as good as having one way to do it.
Yeah, but one way is to the Brownfield case is to declare an external bucket inside Kubernetes. With the green field is to automatically create a provision bucket, right? And this new scheme, the bucket export, and let's say bucket import, it's just about to share a bucket across namespace, right? Nothing else.
Well,
I don't see why we need to factorize that.
I see what you're saying. So here's the thing. How would they refer to the bucket that's shared to the other namespace? When they create a bucket access request, how would they refer to it? Let's say you have a bucket import. Let's go down that path.
A bucket, let's use a bucket name.
Okay, so let's say bucket name is pictures or something, and you're exporting from namespace 1 the pictures bucket to namespace 2, and in namespace 2 you have a bucket import object which imports whatever, right? It imports, or it allows this namespace to request buckets.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens then? Like, what would happen with, like, how would they utilize this imported bucket? So they'll create a BAR. That's the current way. So what will be in the BAR? How will it point to this bucket?
So a new bucket instance will be created in the target namespace with enough metadata to.
Okay, so bucket is cluster scoped. Bucket is already cluster scoped.
Okay. I don't know. So the controller would know that access is allowed from.
Yeah, access allowed. Yeah, that's essentially all it does. But what will the BAR point to? Like, what will in the BAR you have to say which bucket you're accessing. So what will it point to? It needs to point somewhere, right? Like, it could point to the global bucket. That is fine. But wouldn't it be better if it could point to the BR?
Why so?
Because BR is namespaced. The user need not go talk to an admin to find the name of the bucket. right?
Yeah, indeed. So just in the greenfield case, the bucket name is random, and they would have to know the random name to export and all. Is it your concern?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So yeah, so that's kind of how I'm thinking. Maybe next week I'll draw a diagram, so maybe it'll be easier to talk about this. That'll help. Okay, so I don't think we can conclude just yet on this, but I think we have some changes that we agreed on with the KEP, related to the KEP. I think it's fair to say, like Jeff was saying, that maybe we don't solve bucket sharing for alpha, but we have an alternate solution. I mean, we have a path forward if needed. So there is another concern that needs to be addressed, which is bucket mutation. And Jeff came up with an interesting proposal last week after the meeting, and I had a chance to review it. I'll bring it up next week. We didn't have the chance. We didn't have enough time to do it this week. I'll bring it up next week, and we'll go from there. We'll discuss that.
What does it do? Just the mutations?
Oh yeah. So
without going.
So we want to change properties of the bucket. Say we want to change some properties of that bucket, whatever that means. Say we want to increase the storage class standard, or topology of it. I don't know, whatever. So if we want to do that, we don't have a mechanism to do it today. So we want to be able to drive that. The user who created the bucket should be able to drive that change, in the sense they should be able to mutate that bucket. But
it won't be for the alpha, right?
We don't need it for alpha. No.
Yeah.
We're already talking about the next steps, because we can't keep talking about alpha when we have conclusions and decisions having been made already on how we want to do it. Like alpha stage, we have a consensus. We're going to the next step. So we want to talk about mutation. So Jeff's proposal it was explaining something else, but it seems like driving this change through the BR, the bucket request, would be the right way. And yeah, I'll bring it up next week when we get some time, and we'll discuss it further, and we'll see what we can do with that. And if we solve sharing, and if we solve mutation, we can we'll be more than beta at that point. Like we would have addressed all the major concerns, and then after that it's just going to be integrating with different vendors. So sharing and mutation are the two things that we need to iron out. With sharing itself, like we need to figure out what this bucket export is going to look like, what the import is going to look like, and all that. And we have to answer the question of buckets created outside of Cozy. But yeah, I think we're in a good shape, actually. So I don't know, today it seems like we're very productive.
Yeah, so just if I can see something, so we are vendors. So I'm talking for Skality here. We really need something like the alpha to be frozen somewhere to make progress, because we do have customers we are asking for the first use cases, which are Greenfield and Brownfield, right?
Hey, so you can help us do this. Let's
no, just yeah. And then the what you're talking about, the mutation stuff, is interesting, the sharing and all. But it's not. I mean, for, the alpha as it is defined today is, I think, useful enough to be used.
So are you looking to just freeze it somewhere so you know what you're implementing?
No, we want. I mean, I think I'm talking for all the vendors here, so I don't know if I cannot. But we need something frozen out to basically ship our first implementation and have customers using it.
I mean, it's still alpha. I don't know if anyway. So
No, but it's a start, right? It's better than nothing.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay.
What is interesting is the ability to create a bucket, to do a greenfield provisioning.
So the thing is, even after alpha, you'd have to set up the controllers and the cozy controllers and everything yourself. And whatever you have so far, you should already be able to show it to customers.
No, but it's hard for us to target an official release feature if we don't have something,
It could be a scalability product. Like you could say, this is something we've worked on. You don't have to say it's cozy, but I understand where you're coming from, and we're pushing as hard as we can. We're definitely on the way. But the problem that you mentioned, I'm just trying to understand, because I also am a vendor. What we would just do is simply go give them the software, tell them when cozy comes out, we will move you to cozy with no kinks, because this is basically the base of cozy, and we would encourage them to use it.
But we don't want to have, for instance, the spec changing after we start shipping. So
that's what I asked. So you wanted to freeze it rather than just have something called alpha. So for that we need to hear back from Tim. That's the whole step. So we're waiting. Okay. Unfortunately, he's very busy, and we have to work with him. So that's kind of we don't get enough reviews, to be honest. Last time the review we got was on the last day, a few hours before the deadline, and that was not good. This time we're pinging, but we need some help to make sure that he looks at it more. Luckily, we're not near the deadline, so it's a good thing. But that's why I said you can help as a vendor, Vianney. You can help. So Vianney, what you can do is ping Tim and ask him to take a look here.
When is 123 planned to be out?
I don't know the deadline. Shing, would you know?
But around,
I don't think the 123 deadline is published yet. It's not out yet.
Yeah, it's not. So Shing, can we? How do we make them look at this sooner this time? Like, he seems very busy. Or is there someone else who review it?
I think API review would be him, right? So since he has already reviewed the early version, it's actually better, because you find someone else, they start from scratch. It's the same thing. The API reviewers are all like this. They're all very busy, overloaded, and they have a lot of concerns. Yeah, so I think just ping him again early next, Monday. Just ping him early, and also send him emails, right? So try both.
Yeah.
His attention. Maybe he's out. I don't know. Yeah, he did say this week, right? I remember he said this week, but then he's. Yeah, I would say maybe when you ping him on the Slack, also send him an email. Just make sure that, because he probably got pinged by a lot of people. Maybe he missed it. That's possible too.
That's very possible. Okay, I'll send an email, because Slack message is easy to miss. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Okay, Shing, we're out of time, but Vianney, I hear what you're saying.
Yes, sorry. But...
No, it's very valid what you're saying. I take it very seriously. And like I said, we're pushing it as hard as we can. We'll do more. We'll get it done. That's all I can say.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. All right. So that's it for this week. Next week, let's iron out this export and talk about cluster scope buckets. But all of these discussions will not affect alpha. That's the stance. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks,
everyone.